Hi, welcome to Far From Eden. Well, I survived babysitting last night for my neighbor's daughter. It's like, didn't want to do that, like second cousin once removed. No, it's simple. Former neighbor's daughter. Anyway, I survived. It was fun. But in related news, I did not read her this fairy tale that we are going to read today. It is supposedly, I haven't read it yet. I'm going to read it with you guys. I'm a little nervous about it. Supposedly, it is like the worst one. It's the worst one. If you notice, the book is still over there. My book, the Grimm fairy tale, the Brother Grimm fairy tales. You know what I'm talking about. The one we read in every Sunday. Well, this one's not in there. And so I went rogue. I went to the internet and I looked up the one from 1812, which, as far as I can see, is the earliest publication of this fairy tale. And like I said, it's supposedly misogynistic, it's supposedly violent. Apparently, there are so many misogynistic tropes in the Grimm brothers' fairy tales. And I'm like, really? Because we've been just finding some truth. Call it what you want. We've been finding some truth. But I think it's interesting because they try to change the past. They try to say things never happened or didn't happen that way. Or they say, okay, it did happen that way, but that was very wrong. Like expecting women to be mothers. Like, even these days, just to even say expecting women anything is wrong. You shouldn't expect anything. It's like, that's ridiculous. You should definitely have expectations. So I want to read the worst one because it seems to me like the one they don't want us to read, the one that wasn't even, it was so bad. I guess it couldn't go into the publication that I have that's from, what did we say, the 1930s, something like that. So we know Disney took a lot of these stories, and made them into feature-length animated movies like Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty. And they changed them a lot. Well, some of the ones from my book from the 20th century are changed from the one that you guys have, or at least the edition of the story that you have from the 1812 versions and other ones from the 19th century. So this sort of changing of stories and narratives and roles within those narratives has been changing. They have been doing it on purpose because they know that this is how we think. And if they change the stories we tell and they change the archetypes we sort of cast people in, they'll start to change reality. And you might think that sounds crazy unless you were living in 2024 and you can see what's going on in the world. And then you go, I guess we better start believing in conspiracy theories. So, Grimm Brother Fairy Tales, The Robber Bridegroom. Jacob Ludwig Grimm and Wilhelm Karl Grimm. Those are the Grimm brothers. I like how I'm going to do the little thing that this has printed out ahead of time that says the years that they both lived. Jacob Grimm lived from 1785 to 1863, and Wilhelm lived from 1786 to 1859. German philologists whose collection Kinder und, you guys, I'm butchering the German, I'm so sorry. Kinder und Hausmarken, known in English as Grimm's Fairy Tales, is a timeless literary masterpiece. The brothers transcribed these tales directly from folk and fairy stories told to them by common villagers. The Robber Bridegroom, 1812, a miller promises his daughter to a suitor who insists that his bride, I don't want to read that part because I want to read the story out. Don't give me the summary. Okay, ready? Here's the story. There was once a miller who had a beautiful daughter, and when she was grown up, he became anxious that she should be well married and taken care of. So he thought, if a decent sort of man comes and asks her in marriage, I will give her to him. Soon after, a suitor came forward. who seemed very well to do, and as the miller knew nothing to his disadvantage, he promised him his daughter. But the girl did not seem to love him as a bride should love her bridegroom. She had no confidence in him. As often as she saw him or thought about him, she felt a chill at her heart. One day he said to her, "You are to be my bride, and yet you have never been to see me." The girl answered, "I do not know where your house is." Then he said, "My house is a long way in the wood." She began to make excuses and said she could not find the way to it. But the bridegroom said, "You must come and pay me a visit next Sunday. I have already invited company, and I will strew ashes on the path through the wood so that you will be sure to find it." When Sunday came and the girl set out on her way, she felt very uneasy without knowing exactly why, and she filled both pockets full of peas and lentils. There were ashes strewn on the path through the wood, but nevertheless, at each step, she cast to the right and left a few peas on the ground. So she went on the whole day until she came to the middle of the wood, where it was darkest, and there stood a lonely house, not pleasant in her eyes, for it was dismal and unhomelike. She walked in, but there was no one there, and the greatest stillness reigned. Suddenly, she heard a voice cry, turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide." The girl glanced around and perceived that the voice came from a bird who was hanging in a cage by the wall, and again it cried, turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide. This is gonna freak me out, this story. Then the pretty bride went on from one room into another through the whole house, but it was quite empty and no soul to be found in it. At last she reached the cellar, and there sat a very old woman nodding her head. "Can you tell me," said the bride, "if my bridegroom lives here?" "Oh, poor child," answered the old woman, "do you know what has happened to you? You are in a place of cutthroats. You thought you were a bride and soon to be married, but death will be your spouse. Look here, I have a great kettle of water to set on, and when once they have you in their power, they will cut you in pieces without mercy, cook you and eat you, for they are cannibals. Unless I have pity on you and save you, all is over with you." Then the old woman hid her behind a great cask where she could not be seen. "Be as still as a mouse," said she. "Do not move or go away, or else you are lost." At night, when the robbers are asleep, we will escape. I have been waiting a long time for an opportunity. No sooner was it settled than the wicked gang entered the house. They brought another young woman with them, dragging her along. And they were drunk and would not listen to her cries and groans. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, one of white wine, one of red, and one of yellow. And then they cut her in pieces. The poor bride, all the while shaking and trembling when she saw what a fate the robbers had intended for her. Oh my God. One of them noticed on the little finger of their victims a golden ring, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took an axe and chopped it off. But the finger jumped away and fell behind the cask on the bride's lap. The robber took up a light to look for it, but he could not find it. Then said one of the others, Have you looked behind the great cask?" But the old woman cried, "Come to supper, and leave off looking till tomorrow. The finger cannot run away." Then the robbers said the old woman was right, and they left off searching and sat down to eat. And the old woman dropped some sleeping stuff into their wine, so that before long they stretched themselves on the cellar floor, sleeping and snoring. When the bride heard that, she came from behind the cask and had to make her way among the sleepers lying all about on the ground. And she felt very much afraid lest she might awaken any of them. But by good luck she passed through, and the old woman with her. And they opened the door, and they made haste to leave that house of murderers. The wind had carried away the ashes from the path, but the peas and lentils had budded up and sprung up. Oh, that was quick. And the moonshine upon them showed the way. And they went on through the night till in the morning they reached the mill. Then the girl related to her father all that had happened to her. When the wedding day came, when the wedding day came, the friends and neighbors assembled, the miller having invited them, and the bridegroom also appeared. When they were all seated at table, each one had to tell a story, but the bride sat still and said nothing, till at last the bridegroom said to her, "Now, sweetheart, do you know no story?" "Tell us something," she answered. "I will tell you my dream. I was going alone through a wood, and I came at least to a house." I'm too nervous. I'm reading incorrectly. I will start that over. She's telling a dream. "I will tell you my dream. I was going alone through a wood, and I came at last to a house in which there was no living soul. But by the wall was a bird in a cage who cried, 'Turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide.' And then again it said it, 'Sweetheart, the dream is not ended.' Then I went through all the rooms, and they were all empty, and it was so lonely and wretched. At last I went down into the cellar, and there sat an old woman, nodding her head. I asked her if my bridegroom lived in that house, and she answered, 'Ah, poor child, you have come into a place of cutthroats. Your bridegroom does live here, but he will kill you and cut you in pieces, and then cook you and eat you. Sweetheart, the dream is not ended, but the old woman hid me behind a great cask. And no sooner had she done so than the robbers came home, dragging with them a young woman, and they gave her to drink wine thrice, white, red, and yellow. Sweetheart, the dream is not yet ended.'" That's freaking me out that she keeps repeating that. And then they killed her and cut her to pieces. "Sweetheart, my dream is not yet ended." And one of the robbers saw a gold ring on the finger of the young woman, and as it was difficult to get off, he took an axe and chopped off the finger, which jumped upwards and then fell behind the great cask on my lap. And here is the finger with the ring. At these words, she drew it forth and showed it to the company. The robber, who during the story had grown deadly white, sprang up and would have escaped, but the folks held him fast and delivered him up to justice. And he and his whole gang were, for their evil deeds, condemned and executed. How is that story misogynistic? And what is it teaching us? Very gruesome. We had cannibalism, but we don't have an explanation. What am I missing? Should I have not read this on a day when I was this tired? The whole story was she was beautiful. She should fetch this husband. But instead, I don't know, you guys. So why didn't they include this in my version of the collection of stories? Why leave it back? What was it warning? Because all of these tales warn people. I was wondering, why are you going to visit him before you're married? Why are you going, why are you going through the woods to a place you don't know by yourself before you're married? I'm not sure if it isn't something like that. Because think about the one woman, they brought her back. But how much, this reminds me a lot, actually, of the Idaho murders, like the college kids that were murdered in Idaho. It hasn't gone to trial yet. I'm not sure if they have the right guy or not. But the point is that I remember the father of one of the female victims, saying that he had taught his daughter all the right things. He had, done all the right things to teach her to be smart and protect herself and all this other stuff. And I'm like, sir, I saw a video of her getting like drunk in public, obviously drunk in public. I saw a video of her drunk in public, and she was staggering around, and then apparently she got a ride home. Like, that's not safe. And this woman that the robbers, brought home, they got her to drink. She drank wine. It was very clear she drank 3 times. They got her to drink. They got to do this. I think that's no good. I think, you shouldn't be doing things before marriage. You shouldn't be out drinking and hanging around with people who are not good. That's, at least I'm old enough to remember, birds of a feather flock together. And, if you're around bad influences, that's not going to be good for you. You have to avoid that, etc. It could be a warning for that. There's also a very good possibility that I am missing something in this tale. So you guys, please let me know what it is, because this is so important that they had to leave it out. And it's so gruesome to such a degree that they're warning of something. In my modern eyes, it's not obvious. But that does not mean that it's not there. So thank you guys. That was another more truth bombs out of Grimm Brothers fairy tales. That's what they were for. They were for teaching. They were not just for teaching the young people, but also to reinforce the truth that everybody knew. The dangers, what's right, what's wrong, the existence of God, duty, responsibility, all of those things. And we've kind of let it go, unfortunately. But I love you guys. Thank you so much. I hope you found some peace today. I hope you've found something to feed your soul. It's super important. I was very tired, so I put on a pretty dress on Sunday. So it's kind of a weird way to lift my spirits. Call that a coping mechanism. So take care, you guys, and I will see you on the next one. Happy Sunday. Bye.